Hip-hop, a controversial music genre, has been around since the 1980s. But since then, the music has been associated with degrading women and doing drugs.
That seems to be where the research is showing the clearest danger is coming out.
Has the poetry become lost in the profanities? Is rap music even music at all? Straight ahead on Equal Time.
From San Jose State University, you're watching Equal Time, exploring new issues each week, giving equal time to competing points of view.
Hello from the campus of San Jose State University, and welcome to this edition of Equal Time. I'm your host, Journalism School Director Bob Rucker. Rap music is known for having a lot of vulgarity in it, but how damaging can that be? There are two sides to this issue. Unsa Suhail begins our coverage with a look at how some studies show how rap lyrics can have a negative effect on children and their behavior.
Kendrick Lamar is entertaining an audience in Oakland with his rap music. Lyrics laden with words that would be considered obscene in a classroom or even on the street. But this crowd is with him all the way. Audience members here are above 21. A younger crowd could be adversely affected, according to a study in the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The primary effects of exposure to swearing increased violent and aggressive behavior, increased high-risk behaviors, including alcohol and tobacco use, and accelerated onset of sexual activity. Hip-hop has become one of the most popular music formats in the United States, but experts say that with popularity comes a price: the safety of children. The music is part of a culture of exhibiting violence and promoting gangs. A child care provider and parent in Morgan Hill says she has witnessed the ill effects.
I have observed an increase in profanity, just kind of rolling off the tongue. It's like, whoa, do you even realize what you just said?
Nancy Rodriguez says rap music is not conducive to her children's mental growth.
Have my children listen to music that does something for them, whether it's spiritual, whether it's motivating, and I don't see that with rap music.
Rodriguez says she notices a behavioral change in young children she watches in her child care business. She can tell the difference between students who listen to rap music and those who don't.
They're exposed to it, and it comes through in language, comes through in play, in ideas that they'll talk about, themes. You definitely, you hear it, you see it.
Adolescent and child development professor at San Jose State, Maureen Smith, says the role of parents is particularly crucial.
Parents are open and talking and aware of the music, if they're not dumb enough to say no, which will promptly have the teenager listen to it. But if they're open and they say, hey, think about what this is. Think about what this is saying. Is this really how you want to live your life? Is this really what you believe in? Then the teenager can listen to the music and they'll just go, hey, it's great music, but that's not how I want to live my life. But if the parent is oblivious to the music, if the parent just shuts down, doesn't want to talk about it, if the parent doesn't share their values, then it is sort of in some ways their responsibility, because they're letting their teenager enter into that world of music without guiding them and shaping their experience of it.
Smith also says the attitude toward women is directly related to the music.
Both women's views about themselves as sexual objects, as victims of abuse, and as targeted and deserving victims, and then boys' attitudes about how to treat their girlfriends. That seems to be where the research is showing the clearest danger is coming out.
But gender and race issues are not the only concerns surrounding hip-hop music today. Some veterans in the industry do not like where the music scene is going. A DJ who has been involved in hip-hop for over 40 years says technology has taken away from what the music is about. He spoke to this English class at UC Berkeley.
Me, as a DJ, it's making lazy DJs. It makes you not want to dig for records because you can find them on the internet. It makes you not want to communicate with your neighbor to see how good they are.
It's important to remember that all hip-hop is not violent. and it may be argued that the role of the parents is to handle any repercussions of the hip-hop that is violent. Parents can censor their child's music or explain that the lyrics should not be acted out.
When we come back, we'll stir it up when Equal Time returns. Welcome back. We've seen how rap music is taking the rap for being a negative influence on children. But some rappers bridge the gap between education and hip-hop from being hands-on in the classroom to spreading the word about the music. We'll see how that is done. Once again, Unsa Suhail.
A DJ at KSJS Radio, broadcasting out of San Jose State, says hip-hop saved his life, literally.
Well, in 2009, I was involved in a pretty serious car accident, and since the hospital I was staying in for like 6 months did not have internet or TV or anything like that, or a TV worth watching, one of the ways I kind of coped with the insane amount of boredom and like pain and everything was listening to hip-hop.
Mahmoudi has become an active force in the industry by producing a media team to bring attention to new talent. One hip-hop artist, Kendrick Lamar, says his music is about connection with his listeners.
You know, when you can say something that actually goes on in the neighborhood, put it on record, and somebody can relate to it, that's powerful within itself.
A hip-hop duo from Seattle, Blue Scholars, says young minds are the most creative. The group formed its name as a play on the word blue collar, and the lyrics direct attention to the gap between socioeconomic class and empowering the youth.
The power of being youthful, which is something that actually never leaves you, no matter how old you are, as long as you engage it, has a lot to do with consciously making a decision to create your reality. The younger you are, typically, the more inclined you are to want to see your dreams in reality.
Once you reach a certain age, you become set in your ways.
Blue Scholars say through youth uncertainty, society can progress.
So much so that young people are the ones who are the least polluted by the lies that we all sort of believe to operate in this thing we're calling society.
For rapper Freddie Gibbs from Indiana, music has been an outlet to talk about social issues. While performing in the Bay Area, he raps about Oscar Grant, the 23-year-old man who was gunned down in Oakland by a BART police officer in 2009.
That should get a death penalty or something, you know what I mean? We, as, you know, citizens of this country and taxpayers hired this man and empowered him to protect us, you know what I mean? And, you know, they killing us, you know what I mean? And you can act like it ain't a color thing if you want to, but it is.
It's a common theme in rap music to criticize the police.
That same shit is still going on. We still getting, you know, brutalized. We still getting murdered in our own neighborhood, and we still getting, you know, we ain't getting our fair shake from these, you know, police.
Music can be critical, but successful. Gibbs has just signed to a major record label.
All the real fellas in here, make some noise real quick, yo.
Casey Veggies, one of the youngest rappers to achieve status in the industry, is able to support himself at 18 years old.
It showed me new opportunity. It showed me you can go out and, you know, make something out of nothing. And it influenced me, you know. Definitely influenced me to be a go-getter and just be positive.
Some institutions even bridge the gap between hip-hop and education. At UC Berkeley, one of the classes offered is poetics and hip-hop. Senior Oscar Lagressa, leading the session, says the structure of hip-hop lyrics is similar to the structure of poems. In his class, he discusses the creative side of hip-hop.
It's too much of a blanket statement to say that hip-hop is not artistic.
Lagressa says there's merit to studying hip-hop.
Because that's where it deserves to be. It's an art form that deserves to be studied. There are elements, there are structures in it that can be analyzed, they can be identified, and they can be named.
He says the music format is inspiring. Lagressa chose his career path because of the music and has high hopes for where it can go.
There's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, it is an art form, and it's just going to keep growing. And I don't think there's really any limit to where it can go.
In the 1970s, when hip-hop was first introduced, it was considered dance music. Since then, it has picked up other themes such as gangster rap, highly sexualized images, and a materialistic mentality. However, hip-hop still has many loyal fans.
When we come back, we'll sit down with a group of experts searching for solutions when Equal Time continues. Welcome back to this edition of Equal Time. Our focus today is on hip hop, poetry, or profanity. Let's meet our guests.
My name is Yamtul Nazir, and I'm a childcare director, and I've been working in this field for 29 years.
Hi, my name is Mustafa Arshad, and I'm a student senator at De Anza College in the Student Rights and Services Committee.
My name is Damone Carter. I'm a local MC that goes by Dim1, and I'm also the director of the Future Arts Now after school program in San Jose.
My name is Joseph McClett, also a local MC known as Apocalypse, and also a world history teacher at Gunderson High School.
And I'm Unsa Suhail. I'm the reporter for this story.
And I'm the old guy in the middle, but we're going to try to make this work. We're going to have a fun discussion, but I want to talk a little bit about hip hop and where it's at. And Damone, I'm going to start with you because you said something before about my area was the disco era.
Sure.
We gave birth to this music.
Sure.
Why? Why did it go that way?
Well, I mean, hip hop is first of all started in New York. So you had a great melting pot of different musical, racial, cultural things that were happening. So you had the punk movement was going at that time, and you also had disco. So hip hop is kind of an amalgam of everything that was going on at that time, and it kind of rose out of that culture, the disco culture of being in the clubs, started with the DJ, then the DJ wanted to bring a guy along with him to kind of say his name and kind of get the party going, and that became the MC.
Hip hop is more than just music, as a lot of people tend to think it is. It's very cultural. There's a lot of different cultural expressions that are involved with hip hop, more so than just the music. And I think that's really what brings people to the table and become interested in hip hop, is not necessarily just the music, even though that's what some people hear and initially are introduced to hip hop with. But getting the cultural understanding and seeing how it really brings people together, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of benefits, and there's a lot of cultural and community influences that can be found within hip hop.
All right, let me bring in Mustafa at this point and say, everything they're saying sounds interesting and non-threatening, so what's the problem with it?
Well, see, the difference between the hip hop that Joseph grew up with was I think, and the hip hop that I grew up with was some difference. I think there was a lot of positive influences in Joseph's life when he grew up with hip hop, but I'm sure there was some negative influences in hip hop at that time too. But when I grew up, I remember in my first few middle school dances, I was listening to songs like 50 Cent in the Candy Shop or things like that. And as much as we like to not have these kinds of aspects of hip hop represent hip hop, we have to acknowledge that they are a significant part of the way hip hop is marketed in today's society. And so we can't disregard that as a part of hip hop. It definitely is, and especially in the way that the rest of society perceives it. And so as a kid listening to this music and other kids listening to this type of music, it definitely has an impact in the way you act, in the way you perceive what's important in society. And so I think, especially when you're at that impressionable age, you'll soak in anything you can get.
M-Tool, I understand that in our culture, though, it can have a negative effect.
Exactly. I would start saying that, I have two children who grew up listening to hip hop, and they did fine. I did not see any problem because I guess there were some controls at home, some limit setting at home. But being a child care director, lately, I am facing great difficulty where children are using inappropriate language and inappropriate gestures. And again, as a child care specialist, that every time we see that, we have to bring in the families in and find out that where it's coming from. And certainly parents are now using those words. Parents are now using that language at home.
Amtul makes a great point in that the first thing you said is that hip hop didn't have that impact on your children because there were controls in place at home. Right. So let's say if we had a magical wand and we could scrub away every negative aspect of hip hop and we went back to kind of the happy-go-lucky type of stuff that we were more accustomed to when we were growing up. There would be some other influence that would infiltrate a parent that doesn't know how to set the proper boundaries. So are we talking about hip hop, or are we talking about a lack of parental control? So I think a lot of times when we jump on hip hop, it's really a broader context in terms of parental control. Parents that let their kids dress too young and do things like that.
I would like to interject. Is that the parental control? Yes, of course that's true. But I feel that media is playing a very important role in that. They're fantasizing, and that's what the children are getting attracted to earlier and earlier. If you look at the fashion styles, the fashion, they're copying those, and even the mannerism, how they walk.
So at what age do you think it's appropriate to listen to music with rappers?
It just depends on the child. That some children, like I said, that my children, they start listening to it at an earlier stage, but I never saw that in them copying or imitating.
It's nothing unusual for young people to try to mimic or copy the cultural music of the times. Sure. I had a white suit, John Travolta, I'll talk about it, I'll tell you the truth. Right. I don't feel bad about it, but there was nothing threatening about that white suit other than it just didn't look good.
But there was. If you want to go back and look at how people reacted to Elvis Presley, how people reacted to jazz, these things were universally recognized as this is devil music, this is a negative influence on teens, rock and roll, the whole thing. But what it really comes back to a lot for me is that how are we interpreting these images?
You talk about music throughout the different ages. We can look back through the history of art and we can see that profanity and poetry have never been mutually exclusive. There's been so many different times where you've seen that play out. But and you mentioned NWA earlier and Ice Cube. If you look back at that music, it wasn't profanity for profanity's sake. And I think the problem with modern music, what we're seeing in the evolution of it, is hip-hop used to be, yes, there was some profanity in it, but it was mixed in with a larger picture. And you could zoom out from it and you could look at it from a bigger perspective. It was painting a picture. But I think today what you're seeing is profanity for profanity's sake in a lot of mainstream hip-hop. And that's where it's going towards.
I think it goes back to the point that Amtul made earlier, the fact that media is behind this. We're talking about music that is in the mainstream. Mm-hmm. Being that it's in the mainstream tells you that you have billion-dollar corporations, you have media moguls, you have people who know advertisement, people who understand psychology, people that understand the way that certain communities and then individuals react to messages. You need to go back and ask the question, is it rap music? Is it hip hop? Or is it because it's in the mainstream and we're hearing these messages 60, 70 times a day that maybe there's other forces behind this that makes it more accessible to us? Because for some reason or another, for the last 30 years, hip hop and rap music have become mainstream society. It's become embraced by mainstream society.
How do you define mainstream, though? Because I'm still part of society, even though I don't have any hair anymore. Mm. And quite frankly, some hip hop I like, most of it I don't. I'll be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. And then you can feel free, anybody, to either agree or disagree. I do think young people are impressionable. They always have been. They do pick up from stars, and they pick up on a lot of things. The language, certainly the profanity concerns, but there's also the dress issues. I'm embarrassed for young men today in the way they're dressing, largely because of hip hop. because I think it looks like garbage. But then maybe I'm talking the words that my parents taught me. You just mentioned something about parental guidance. If that parental guidance came back, they may not like what you're doing.
Well, and I think you make a great point about what is mainstream, and Joey was talking about hip-hop as a mainstream phenomenon. Hip-hop, and I think a lot of what we're talking about is actually just rap, but rap is the most direct form of musical communication. In rap, you don't have to talk in an extended metaphor or do a double entendre to get your thing across. You're saying, I want to make money. You don't have to make up a metaphor for that. It's very direct. And as such, it is very easily co-opted to sell anything. That you know, I turn on the TV and I see images that I don't want my daughters to emulate that have nothing to do with hip hop. You know what I'm saying? I don't want my daughters to emulate these kind of teen debutante, or you know, they've got a show on one of these channels where it's the 5-year-old princesses and tiaras or whatever, where they're just these horribly distorted images of womanhood and things like that. So I don't say it to defend that thread in hip hop, because it's there. Misogyny, it's a male-dominated form. Hip hop is all aspects, and there's always going to be a thread of misogyny there. But what you're talking about is what has happened is we placed a magnifying, and not we, but you know, the media, the powers that be that control the images on your television sets that are coming out your radios, they placed a magnifying glass on the absolute worst parts of our culture.
Well, I think the reason they're doing that is because they know that image sells, and it has been selling.
Sure.
And isn't that a frightening thought that our children are consuming these as a faster and faster pace?
Sex sells everything.
But it also may be selling something we don't want to sell. I'm going to use your own words. Okay. I don't want my child to hear any group using the N-word. Because your generation seems to think you can change its meaning, change its history, change its impact. No, you haven't. You'll find that out when you get older, I believe. Now, that's just my opinion. But there are many people out in society that don't like the cultural style because we don't think you understand what you're saying.
And there's always going to be that cultural shift when the things that, you know, my mom thought were cool, my grandma didn't think were cool. And the things that I thought were cool, my mom didn't think were cool, and you know, you kids don't know anything. And I'm 35, and I catch myself saying things like that too. But in terms of hip hop, and I'm glad you brought up the N-word specifically. In terms of the rebranding of the N-word, it's always going to have its legacy. It will always have its legacy, the negative connotations of it. I'm an African American who works in primarily Latino and Asian communities here in San Jose, working with the youth who the word for them is a currency and it's a term of endearment, and you can say that it's not, and you can say that you kids don't understand 400 years of oppression, and I've done that one with them, but they don't. And hip hop has given them a way to rebrand that word and use it as a term of endearment, and that's just one of the things hip hop does. It's like we take trash.
Congratulations, though. Congratulations. You sound just like that media television group that you just talked about. You've decided that can be done.
It can be done.
One of the challenges
it can be done.
One of the challenges we use in school is how many people name their children Hitler? Why don't you rebrand that name? Because you can't. It's one of those words, one of those names that you just don't touch.
The N-word's more malleable.
It's more, but both of these words are evocative.
I mean, if we want to talk about your generation, look at Richard Pryor. We didn't learn this from nowhere. Pick up a Funkadelic record. We didn't pick up these images and threads from nowhere.
I'm not saying that our generation didn't give you things. We certainly did.
Sure, but
I do think we were much more cautious about certain words, and I don't want to talk too much. You go for it.
Well, let's talk about just the influence that hip hop has on specific communities altogether, right? We've had the N-word, and we talk about images that hip hop has sold to the separate communities, but I think the N-word has become something that's way popularized through hip hop. It could not have been done without hip hop today, and so that's something that was sold and now is part of our society. And if you look back maybe 30 years, would someone have thought that would have been a part of society? Sure. If we look 30 years in the future, who are we to say that maybe these images of women in hip hop, who we think, okay, that's like the extreme, who's to say that doesn't become a part of it, right?
What's funny about that, and I go back to the comment that you made about the disco era. Women were being objectified in that era as well. The 1970s was a huge time period of sexual liberation and freedom coming from the 1960s. And so if you look at what women were wearing in the 1970s, who were in the disco clubs, who were on the posters, who were later the poster girls in the 1980s for the rock and roll and heavy metal bands that were talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll before you even heard any hip hop artists talking about that. That era also had that element.
Does that. I know Unsa has some other thoughts.
Well, do you think that today's music objectifies women more because now the B word is becoming an appropriate term to use for girls, just saying like one of your friends? Did that come from hip hop?
No, and I'll tell you this much. It's funny because I could turn on the cable networks and hear the B word thrown around so openly on cable network and television, more so than I even hear it in hip hop and rap songs that I listen to on a regular basis.
I don't know about that. As a term for endearment for someone's woman.
Let's take the example of the word slut, which was used recently, right, on television. There was a huge backlash from that. If we took any rapper or MC today who used that word, there would be not as much of a repercussion from that, I think, because it's just accepted in hip hop culture. They just be like, well, that's just what they do. I think it's far more accepted in hip hop nowadays, and we need to reform it so that everyone's on the same level. Just because you're part of a cable show doesn't mean you should get more of whiplash for saying a word than if you're part of a hip hop culture.
And it's funny how people, well, there's people like Rush Limbaugh recently who got in trouble for, he was talking about the college student and that whole situation. He used some terminology and he goes, well, rappers use it all the time. So we've even got Rush Limbaugh now. We've been able, it gives certain people a license to do and say things that they might not do, but it just speaks to the overall power of it. And it's how do we harness that power?
Though? Isn't that a dangerous power, and shouldn't it be used responsibly?
Well, this is the thing. Hip hop is always going to be that thing that exposes nasty truths. The B word and the N word don't catch on like Hitler can't catch on, because the hip hop speaks some elemental, fundamental truths about this society. And people connect it. That's why they like it. That's why they say things like, keep it real.
That the music plays such an important role in our curriculum, because we know that is great for their cognitive development, for their verbal skills, for their emotional intelligence. And I remember because, 25 years ago, we used to play radio. We were allowed to use radio. But now we have the policy that we cannot turn on the radio, because if you give the children a choice, what station they are going to.
Sure. You want to point out 50 Cent, you want to point out Big and every negative rapper. They're literally a pawn in the game when you think about, these mega media conglomerates that control the message. Me and Joey could spit you 20 rappers that have a positive message, that have something worthwhile to say, that are nowhere on the map.
Blood, sweat, and tears angered the White House when they talked about war. What is it good for? But we needed to hear that song. So creative energy and creative license still has to flourish, and we have to go. I'm sorry our time is up. But I thank you. This was illuminating, and certainly I learned a lot. And Unsa, thank you for your reporting, and thank you for joining us. We hope you'll come back for another edition of Equal Time.